This is the minor side of life. And now, Rob Sternberg.
Thank you, Pete, and we're so glad you're with us here on the minor side. This is where, of course, we talk candidly about the business and promotional aspects of minor league sports. Each episode, you'll hear from a different guest who's either worked in a minor league office or played or performed on the minor league stage. We talk about how they got started, what they've learned, and some opinions and personal stories along the way. If you've worked in minor league sports or wanted to know what it's like, this is the show for you. For me, though, from the Texas League and the Eastern League to the PCL and now the International League, I'll bring almost a decade of minor league baseball stories and experience to the table, and very much looking forward to sharing them with you. If you're listening to this as it is originally released, thank you so much for your support. It certainly means a lot, and we definitely invite you to share, like, and listen over at minorside.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the upcoming weeks, we've got a lot more to roll out. I'll tell you about it at the end of this episode. Until then, we have certainly got a real treat. Some call him the San Diego Chicken. Some call him the famous Chicken. I usually just stick with Chicken. And in this episode with the Chicken, episode number 3 for those keeping score, is presented by Promotional Adventures. It's hard to believe it is just about that time when and if your organization is putting together a promo item list for this coming 2020 season, or you're getting orders in for hockey, basketball, or fall or winter college sports. Make sure to get it over to Promotional Adventures. And we'll share a little bit more in just a bit. And what's amazing here in regards to the Chicken, and we'll get into this, of course, as we go along, but in the 1980s, the Chicken was like a rock star. I mean, there was a time where the Chicken was one of the hottest deals on the entertainment side of sports, which is, of course, what we talk about here on the minor side. He was living out of a suitcase in a different town every night, doing his show, and a very physical show at that, and then hopping on a plane and driving to the next town, doing the same damn thing all over again the next night. Some have called him a real revolutionary in terms of mascots and sports, mascotting, as some have called it, and major league teams having mascots at that, just the whole concept. And over here on the minor side, so to speak, we've got teams with 4, 5, 6, 7 mascots. It's turned into something we think about when we think about baseball, and certainly minor league baseball. And Ted, as we welcome you in, you've definitely got that ball rolling in a big time sense. I don't remember the first time I saw the Chicken, but as far as being a kid and watching baseball, especially shows like This Week in Baseball and getting Sports Illustrated for kids and seeing blooper tapes, it was certainly somewhere in one of those. But for sure, one of the first times I saw you live was when you were in Philadelphia for the WrestleMania pay-per-view, of course. Maybe we'll get into that. If not, it's okay. But the first time I met you was my first year in baseball in 2011, and you did an appearance in Northwest Arkansas for the Naturals. I think you had appeared a couple of times there previously, if I'm not mistaken, and Eric Edelstein was the GM, and Frank Novak there, who you worked with, he loves you. And that was my first time seeing your bits live, and you were just fucking great. You really were. And for those listening, if you're not familiar, you could hit pause right here, come back, of course, but take a couple of minutes, hit pause, check out the Chicken on YouTube, because this is how mascot entertainment should be. I mean, they're bits. There's a purpose. There's nothing is just fluff and just standing there waving. And if you have anything to do with promotions on your team, show your mascots or promotions people clips of the Chicken. Then, of course, head back on over here as we break it all down with the man himself. And he's been on the line, the actual telephone line. So bear with us here. He's made over 5,000 appearances in all 50 states, 7 Canadian provinces, 8 countries in total, making you just about a national treasure. And he's not just limited to baseball, but done hockey and football as well. He's appeared in music videos, commercials, movies, did a TV show with Johnny Bench and Tommy Lasorda. And speaking of those Hall of Famers, the Chicken Suit resides in Cooperstown as well. But we have the man right now with us. Pleasure to have the San Diego Chicken, Ted Giannoulis. Ted, we're glad to talk to you.
Well, it's a pleasure being on the show with you, Rob. You've got a unique perspective on your podcast, focusing in on the minor side of baseball and probably sports in general. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank God. Geez, thank God, Ted. Not only thank God you're here, but, I was talking to a lot of people, very excited, as you can imagine, to do this in case you couldn't tell. And they said, how are you going to interview a chicken? But you're talking and everything. So that's just great. We're off to a roaring start.
Well, what the heck? Big Bird talks, Barney the dinosaur talks, Miss Piggy talks, and so what the heck? Why can't a chicken talk?
Absolutely, and you did throw me off. Your talking did throw me off in some of your bits as I was trying to do some research here. You do one where you're a stand-up comedian in the stands telling jokes. You hear your voice telling the jokes, and you have all the fans holding poster head cutouts of your chicken head to make it look like you're performing to a bunch of chickens doing comedy bits, and the bits are pre-recorded, so it just threw me off. You don't expect a mascot to speak, of course, but you're right. The Muppets and whoever else, whatever mascotting characters, it's certainly part of the arsenal, so to speak. But in general, you have sort of a slapstick style. And can you comment on that, whether you agree or not, and what sort of inspired your style?
Well, growing up, Rob, I was always a big comedy fan and a sports fan. And essentially what I ended up doing was merging the two into this unique act as I became an adult. But growing up, I was really influenced by Harpo Marx, the Three Stooges, all kinds of comedians, including the stand-up comedians as I got older. It ranged from Bob Hope to Steve Martin to Robert Klein, and it went on. The Richard Pryor, of course, he was the king. So much. I would watch Carson. These were legendary comedians back in the day, and so much of their material still stands up today. But I really enjoyed the slapstick aspect of comedy acts, and so that's what influenced me as I fell into this. I guess livelihood, you can call it, of playing in a chicken suit. I just brought all together all these characteristics that I had learned, I guess were inside of me from all these years, and just implemented them into a comedy act that was unprecedented for its time.
Yes, let's talk about that. You were hatched at one point in front of 50,000 people who literally came to see you. So when we hear in minor league sports that it's not necessarily about the game and it's about the fan experience and entertaining the fans, I mean, this is what it's all about. But let's set the stage here, because you were the chicken long before this hatching at the Padres game happened in 1979, and you had a fight for legal ownership of the character as well, even the suit. But you started out working for KGB, a rock station in San Diego, in a deal that had nothing to do with sports. This is the mid-'70s. I guess, how old were you at the time?
Oh, I started off, I was still in college. I was still in my sophomore year in college, so I had to have been about 21 or so.
And so were there people at the station who were clamoring to do this? I mean, these days in some of our offices, it's like the person who draws the short straw or the rookie has to wear the costume. So were you among people at the station clamoring to wear the suit, or why you?
Oh, no, nobody at the station wanted to wear the suit. I wasn't even an employee of KGB. What they did, they dispatched a representative to the campus at San Diego State to find any kid that would agree to do this for $2 an hour. Just by happenstance, they came across me at a campus radio station where I was hanging out the day before Easter break, and there were about 4 or 5 of us hanging out there. And the guy just walks in cold turkey, no pun intended. He just walks in there. He says, "Hey, anybody want to do this for $2 an hour?" We all volunteered because we saw an opportunity to get our foot in the door at a real radio station. And so we all volunteered. We would have volunteered if you said, you got to empty trash cans, you got to shine records, you got to wear a chicken suit. Big deal. We'll do it, whatever it takes. He looks around the room. He sees me in the far corner. He says, you're the shortest guy here. I think you'll fit the costume best of all. You're hired. There was no job application to fill out, no audition to take, not even an interview to sit for. Guy just hired me on the spot. He says, you start tomorrow. I'll see you down at the zoo. We'll have the costume. You just go there for a couple hours and give away the candy Easter eggs. You do that every day, and after a week, you'll be done, and that's that.
And so the station, I guess, starts sending you as this chicken mascot around the area to grand openings, other sort of station remotes that they do. And you said you were trying to make the most of this opportunity and were a fan of baseball. And I read you kind of took this as an opportunity to seek out the Padres and show up to old Jack Murphy Stadium. You have to add the old to any old stadium. You can't call, especially when they're named after people, I feel like. You can't say Joe Robbie Stadium anymore. It's old Joe Robbie or Old County Stadium. But you were at old Jack Murphy Stadium on behalf of the radio station for the first few years, at least. But when did you sort of put your own flair on the character? Was it in that time? I'd imagine you didn't walk in one day and start messing with umpires at Padres games.
No, I was just up in the grandstands for about 3 years. I didn't even think of going on the field, and nor was anyone allowed to back then. And again, the only way I ended up doing stuff on the diamond is by the invitation of the Padres, and that was by virtue of creating so many laughs and so much enjoyment for fans up in the grandstands that the Padres figured, hey, let them fool around on the field with the players, the umpires, the coaches. Let's see what happens. And that's where they gave me the green light. But I thought, to get back to your question, the spirit of your question, I started putting a flair into it really that very first night, and I was at a ball game. The whole premise behind it, Rob, was to attract attention for the radio station. Now, just wearing a costume has a novelty for about 10 minutes. After that, you got to start doing something. You know, I didn't want to be like a character walking around just waving. So I said I have to amuse myself, and so I just basically started having fun and improvising sight gags in the grandstands that people seem to enjoy here.
And so we're talking about your relationship with the Padres, and so many times ideas this big and this different don't happen without a real champion in your corner, so to speak. I mean, you're breaking down a barrier as an entertaining fan, really, to going on the field with your act. I'm sure it ruffled some feathers, if you don't mind the pun, but seriously, who were you working with in the Padres office that was really in your corner?
I just picked up the phone and called up the director of promotions, a gentleman by the name of Jim Weigel, and he took the call, and I explained to him what was up. And you've got to understand something, Rob. This was the first year of Ray Kroc, and the team was ready to move to Washington, D.C. He came in literally New Year's Eve, 1973, at the 11th hour, and bought the team from moving to Washington to save the Padres to stay in San Diego. And so as Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's as we know it today, took over, he was open to all kinds of new thinking. He wanted his customers happy. It didn't matter what the score was. He wanted his customers, his fans, going home happy. And by chance, he saw that this guy in a chicken suit is making a lot of my fans happy. I like it. And so, and that was the thinking throughout the Padre office, that we've got to do something to jumpstart attendance here and give fans a better time at the game, win or lose. And I just happened to show up, and Jim Weigel was very open-minded about things. He said, I'll get back to you here very shortly. He ran it up the flagpole, and they said, you're welcome to come, provided, like I say, you give us a couple of plugs on the radio that we're playing tonight. I said, that's a deal. I can do that. And so they set aside a ticket for me, and out I came and started cavorting around. And like anything else, Rob, you got to prove yourself in the audition. Every day is an audition. And so I went out there and started goofing in the grandstands, and once again, to attract attention for the radio station call letters that were on me. And I felt I could do this best with a sense of humor and not impede the dignity of the game. That's the trick. So I showed up as a fan, acted as a goofy fan, and everybody seemed to enjoy it. And that's how it took off.
And it certainly evolved, I'd imagine, over the course of that time as well. So we're getting to the point now where you're sort of going out to have your divorce with the radio station. It's sort of interesting. We're seeing a little bit of that now between the Philly Fanatic and the manufacturer of that costume. But in your case, this happened about 40 years ago. The station didn't want to copyright the suit, and you did. What happened there?
They chose to fire me when we came to loggerheads over the copyrights of the costume. They didn't want to buy the copyright for whatever reason, and I felt it was important that they do so. Well, when they denied and didn't want to do it, I went ahead and did it. And then they argued that I didn't really have the real copyright from the manufacturer, that it belonged to them. Well, the courts ruled in my favor, and they said I own the rights to the suit. And so the station, like I say, fired me. They filed a lawsuit to prevent me from branching out on my own. But the courts ruled in my favor, and I've been out on my own ever since.
I'm sure a relief for you and even the Padres as well. At this point, you're a drawing card for them, and we're inching closer to talk about the re-debut, the grand hatch, if you will. Quickly, I guess, were you ever their official mascot?
No, never was an official mascot of the Padres. Oh. Never was on their payroll at all. I did all those games for free for the Padres, more than 5 years straight. Once again, the radio station was paying me a minimum wage all those years. And I would do more than just Padre games. I would do concert events. I would do the Charger games, Aztec football, basketball, hockey, everything around town. If there was a public event, the chicken was there. Parades, trade shows, conventions, even promotions in the park that we would stage with the radio station. I was quite ubiquitous. I would be all over town, an ambassador at large, and I did it all at minimum wage. Did not complain. And I just felt it was a big opportunity somewhere along the line if I just stuck to my knitting, as they say. And eventually, after the radio station fired me, that's when I broke out on my own, and I decided to do it in a brand new outfit at the time because my old costume was still tied up in litigation, so I decided to make a new one. What the heck? And eventually I got my old suit back, but I had my grand hatching in a new outfit in front of 47,000 people at Jack Murphy Stadium, hatched out of a gigantic styrofoam egg during a ceremony where they moved back the game a half an hour to accommodate it. And it was a tremendous moment breaking out of the egg and debuting my new outfit. And because of that, it got so much attention internationally, for that matter, that all the teams started calling me and asking me if I might come to their towns to perform. And lo and behold, they saw that it became a box office attraction for them. And so it unfolded that way, and it's provided me a career ever since.
Well, I do think, with all due respect, Chicken, that you're underselling it a little bit here, and we sort of have to retrace our steps a bit just to set the stage. In that this is the late '70s. It's not today where you walk into a $50 million minor league baseball stadium and see 12 mascots. Mascots in particular here aren't, for lack of a better word, normal. They're not a normal run-in-the-mill deal here, where maybe there's, like you said, people in a suit standing there waving, but certainly not developed characters. This is something totally different, in a totally different era, and groundbreaking in its day. The Padres were on their way to losing almost 100 games, and for this event here, push back the game time to do this rehatching. The Padres players carried you out in this giant egg, and I do want to get into the pre-production for this, but you're being lowered in this egg, and now they move start times back today for anything but...
Oh, it was it was unprecedented. Absolutely, Rob. Just a little backstory that I had this gigantic styrofoam egg sitting in the bleachers all week, advertising that I'd be coming out of that egg. Well, and it was quite a prop to see night after night, and right there in the bleachers. I mean, somebody could have bashed it with a home run ball. Thankfully, the Padres couldn't hit home runs back then, so it was pretty safe. But anyway, the egg was believe it or not, was stolen the night before by some pranksters who hoofed out with it, and then I suppose when they stole it at midnight, believe it or not, came in and stole it at midnight and hustled out with it. I guess when they sobered up the next day, they recognized it was a felony theft, so they better make good. They called up a TV anchor, asked him if he could be as a broker go-between between me and them. It was four guys actually, and they wanted a few demands: immunity from prosecution, 4 tickets to the game that night, and all the beer they could drink free on the house. And I made the deal. I got my egg back, and then and the Padres figured out, hey, why don't we bring it in a gigantic armored truck with armed guard? And so the California Highway Patrol lined up a motorcade to bring me in and paraded me around the field,
and that adds so much to the scene on the field. Who knows if that doesn't happen? Do you have that extra publicity and buzz and police escorts?
Yes, absolutely. The guy who made it happen was the senior vice president of promotions at that time, was Andy Strasburg of the Padres. And he lined all that up literally on hours' notice, if you can believe it, and staged it that way. And the players came out, the entire Padre team came out and lowered me from the roof of the armored truck onto the field, and as they played 2001 Space Odyssey, I burst out of the egg. I'll give you something else that you don't know, Rob.
Something else?
That there were 2 out of the 3 local channels here in San Diego that interrupted local programming to show the grand hatching live on TV. That's right, here locally. You can't even do that today because of broadcast rights, but back then, because it was such a newsworthy item locally, 2 out of the 3 stations interrupted the programming and showed it live, which was, I was just flabbergasted to this day, and let alone there was an international press that came out to cover it. So it was kind of exciting, but you know what? It was all based on a sense of humor, and that's kind of heartening to see.
So you're sitting in the egg, waiting back in the tunnel. It's not too long ago, just 40 years, that's all. But what do you remember? What was going on through your mind? You're nervous, thinking about what could go wrong, excited, what?
Yeah, I can put myself back there because I remembered it quite vividly. It was kind of very exciting. I mean, but the fans were in hysterics. I mean, they were the cheering was unbelievable because it was an emotional moment. Don't forget, the court said I could not come back in a chicken suit at that time. I had an injunction on me, and so I was coming back in my own version of a costume that I couldn't call a chicken quite yet. But there I was, and I was very nervous inside. Needless to say, I could hear the audience. I could hear the ball players just going nuts. I said, Teddy, if you could hear us in there, it's crazy out here. These people are nuts. They're nuts. And so as they laid me on the diamond, I was literally breaking out in a cold sweat. The temperature may have been about 80 degrees, probably a lot hotter inside that egg, probably over 100. But the funny thing is, I was literally breaking out in a cold sweat. The only time I had really felt anything like that, Rob. And I mean, I was shivering. It was so cold. And it was cold sweat. That's how my nerves were. And so I started rolling around in the egg as I heard the music, and then as it reached a crescendo, I tried kicking it out, because this egg, there's no rehearsal. You got to do it in one take. It was sculpted from a huge block of styrofoam, so it doesn't come apart easy. I literally had to break out of it. And I tried kicking and with all my might, and it would not break. And I just kept doing it as hard as I could. And finally it busted and exploded upwards and out. And I came out of the egg, and it was a magnificent moment seeing everybody giving a standing ovation like that went on for a good 10 minutes, I've got to say. And a couple of Padre players came out and carried me off on my shoulders their shoulders off the diamond, and it was a remarkable feeling to say the least, and a tremendous night. Thankfully, believe it or not, I did not think about it at the time, but the vice president of the Padres, Andy Strasburg, he was smart enough to save a couple of chunks of that styrofoam egg for me as a souvenir, and I didn't even think of saving the egg otherwise, but he did that for me, and I have that to this day.
That's awesome. So you burst out onto the scene really and put together a trailblazing career. You talk about some of your relationships with the Padres players, and to this day, sometimes we'll get a visiting entertainer and even our own mascots, and they'll try to work some deal out with the players, with the visiting players or umpires, and there's some brushback. And I do want to get into what you do, but just since it happens to be sometimes with promotional giveaways too, trying to line up a giveaway that features the players, but then of course you don't know if the guy's actually going to be on the team or even the organization. I do want to take the time here to talk about promotional adventures. The best we ever did with lining up a bobblehead giveaway and the player was in Omaha. One time at least, where the player we featured started out the year with us, and that bobblehead was produced, of course, by Promotional Adventures. And there's no one else I'd rather make a bobblehead with than Promotional Adventures. And that particular one we're talking about, Chris Dwyer, was signed off on just before New Year's and on time for an April 5th or 6th giveaway. And the player, Dwyer, again, whose brilliant effort in the AAA National Championship game, actually right here in the Lehigh Valley, they led the team to an improbable first of 2 AAA titles. So we're like, let's fuck it, go ahead, we'll do a Dwyer bobblehead. At the Royals, it was a pretty crowded rotation, so he started the year back with us even after that effort. And so he was available for autographs before the game, signing and posing with his own bobblehead. And that's really just one example, the late order, taking it, getting it to us on time, really just 4 months. And that's just one example of Dustin and Cindy and the team at Promotional Adventures going above and beyond to make sure something was accurate, on time, got the sponsor right, and everybody goes home a winner, of course. A lot of us have been in situations where we're tight on a deadline and a sponsor just come in at the very last day and we're having the Vector logo conversation. What is a Vector logo? What isn't a Vector logo? This news was passed along to Dustin and his team, and in this instance, he came up with a brilliant, affordable solution to get the item on time to us once we were able to get the sponsor artwork. I personally would not endorse a company I wouldn't do business with myself, and there's not another vendor I'd rather work with or has saved me more times in the past for that matter as well. And it's hard to believe the off season is just about here, so when your organization gets your list together, make sure to get it over to Dustin and Cindy at Promotional Adventures. They won't take forever to get back to you with quotes. They specialize in just about every promo item, like polyresin stuff, wearables like caps and jerseys, backpacks, the ever popular fanny pack, and equipment like soccer balls and mini bats as well. Their catalog is conveniently located online at promotionaladventures.com. So rather than me continue to list these items, you can simply browse now for some ideas as well. If you're already set with what you want, or you have this one crazy idea that you're just trying to get made, a lot of times all of us here on the minor side do, shoot an email over to Dustin right now at dustin@promotionaladventures.com with a decent description for a quote. Again, dustin@promotionaladventures.com. You won't be disappointed. But anyway, Ted, back to the business at hand. It sounded and certainly looked like you had a great relationship with the players. How is that cultivated even, and
well, how's
it now?
Here's how it's cultivated. It's easy. I mean, when players hear the fans laughing in the grandstands, they turn around and see what's going on. And when they see me goofing, and they think it's funny as well, they come up to me with ideas before the next game, and they suggest, hey, why don't you come out and do this with me, or why don't you do this with a teammate? And the umpires would say, hey, why don't you come out and goof with us, and it just like I say, developed onto its own, and the players started offering ideas and such, and the Padres got to see this every day, and they seemed to enjoy it, and gave me leeway, and wasn't hurting the game at all. It was adding to the festivities. Players were quite cordial, very nice, and like I say, they could see that it was working, and it was creating some more laughs. There's a good sense of humor about baseball players, at least there was back in the day, and the camaraderie that existed was a relaxed atmosphere that people had fun with, and the fans identified with it all.
And over the course of the years, then, how have you either seen that change or stay the same? When you walk into a ballpark today, I know you're in Amarillo not too long ago. What changes have you noticed from any of the participants, really?
Well, I notice at the major league level that the more money that's made, I don't see the increased degree of happiness about it, for whatever reason, as strange as it may sound. It's festered a little more cynicism about things, unfortunately. But I remember back in the day when the money was good but not fabulous. Players really had a more relaxed approach to the game. They played hard between the white lines, but they enjoyed. I think they enjoyed the journey a little bit more. And in the minor leagues, the players continue to be great for the most part, and same with the umpires and the coaches, the managers. It's really something, seeing these kids excited and working up the ladder. But like I say, in the major leagues, it's safe to say it's become a very, very big and serious business, and there's a little more of a button-down attitude, I think, overall.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned umpires and managers and those sorts of field personnel, but umpires specifically, they've provided just a tremendous foil for you in so many of your bits. Tell me about the umpires a little bit and just working with them over the years.
Well, the truth be known, they're great. They really are. I think something that we discovered along the way is how my antics really seem to humanize the officials, the umpires out there, and so it really had a great effect. I can't even begin to tell you how many umpires came to me with ideas to try something with them in the third inning or the fifth inning or the seventh inning, and I was.
Did you wind up using any?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Oh, they have great ideas. They came up with sensational ideas. I remember one time as I saw Joe West and his crew walking up into the stadium well before the game, and it was like 85 degrees out in San Diego at the time, and he comes up to me, Joe does, and he says, "Ted, why don't you come out there, help us out? It's 95 degrees. Bring us a drink, bring us a towel, do something, help us out there." Okay, I got to thinking, hey, that's a great idea. That is a great idea. I'll go out there. In fact, I'll make it like I'm their corner man in boxing.
Sure.
I'll go out there. I'll bring out a stool for them to sit down. I'll give them a towel to wipe down with. I'll put it around their neck. I'll give them water, and I'll have them spit it out and make it like a whole corner man you would see in boxing, and a whole gag developed out of that, and it was basically Joe West's idea, and the fans just had a good time with it.
I saw some bits where, and the boxing you talk about got me going down a Rocky scenario, but there was another deal where you're punching out the players or people dressed like the players.
Yes.
Are those shoot players?
Yeah. The Houston Astros one time told me, "Hey, why don't you come up there into the bullpen and challenge us to a fight with you, and we'll just all gang tackle you out there, So it'll be 1 against 8, okay? And we'll just smother you out there." And I said, "Hey, that's pretty funny. Yeah, let's do that." Again, slapstick comedy, like we just talked about earlier, Rob. And so these guys were up for it. But then I figured, hey, wait a minute, let's do this. Let's you guys jump me. I'll come back the next inning and then duke it out with you with boxing gloves. And this time you guys go down one at a time. And they played along, and it was a tremendous reaction. And I just developed that gag over the years a little bit more, using basically EMTs to come out there and save me after I'm knocked out cold by them, and they carry me off on a stretcher, and then I come back out, with a trainer who lets me go, and I go back out there and then challenge them on once again, and out they come, and these are all little, for those who haven't seen it, these are basically little 90-second sketches that I do between innings to amuse the fans, and players graciously just played along and had fun with it, and it was all to benefit the fans and especially the kids in the stands as well.
Sure, and there's a great bit with the kids dressed up as chickens following you around, and they also take a leak on the umpire's shoes.
Yeah.
I like also the one where you're begging to shine the umpire's shoe, and then he lets you, but then he won't tip you. And you get fired up about the lack of generosity, shall we say, and then you start kicking dirt on his shoe, and then he throws you out, and then you start pleading with him to stay, and ultimately you start kissing the same foot that you had kicked dirt on that had previously shined. It's just a whole world of emotions wrapped up in 90 seconds.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you watch these videos, everybody's laughing, like legit laughing hard, like they're at a comedy club, and the comic is killing it.
Oh, the first time I ever did that was improvisationally with an umpire, and it just took off from there. The whole idea was to mimic a manager arguing with an umpire. Only I was arguing with an umpire because after I shined his shoes, he wouldn't tip me.
He was being a dick about it.
Right. And so I go into a rant, and of course he throws me out of the game, and that's where I try to beg for forgiveness, and to no avail. And then I exit the whole thing with a raised leg salute to him, and the audience. First time I ever did that, the audience just exploded. And I said to myself, "This one's a keeper. This is like This goes into the greatest hits bin that I keep breaking out every now and then." And so.
Give me an idea of your travel schedule. At your busiest times, how much of your time was in San Diego? Peak travel times, how much were you splitting San Diego with other cities? I'd imagine when you're constantly in front of the home crowd, you can't just play the hits, right?
Right. Oh, and I would always try different things, but all throughout the 70s, I was in San Diego virtually 100% of the time. In the 80s, the 90s, and the new century, basically, I was on the road, safe to say 90% of the time, going all 50 states, 8 or 9 countries around the world, and I was someplace all the time, and fans would come out and they'd want to see the live show. And on those special nights, you try to give them the best stuff that you've got. Meanwhile, if back in San Diego, I could be more experimentational with other ideas, and I have the time for that, and try different things. And once they worked, I took those ideas out on the road as well. So it was just a cycle of ideas to keep trying, and then they eventually take out there.
And in terms of your travel in the 80s, give me an example of what a typical year is like. I assume you're busy with baseball, but you're doing football and hockey. What's a typical year for you then?
Oh, I was on the road 250 days out of the year, straight through, for all sports, and that included not only Major League and Minor League baseball in the States, it also included winter ball down in the Latin American countries, and then as well football, basketball, hockey, and let alone other things like shooting TV commercials or doing TV shows, and doing trade shows and conventions and even parades. I was Grand Marshal of the Mardi Gras parade down in New Orleans one year, and so that was fun. And so I did a variety of things that I found all to be intriguing and fun and quite enjoyable. But like I say, that was a lot of travel back then, and it was so much travel. I don't think conceivably it could even be done today, because there aren't as many flights going, and so they're more consolidated. But travel was a little more easier, obviously, back in the day.
And what were your accommodations like?
Oh, they were always good. Yeah, the accommodations were basically 8 or 10 hours at a hotel, and then we were on the plane the next day. The normal baseball season, I'll give you an idea, over 4 months of 120 days, I would end up doing, easily 110 games. So, it was packed. I didn't even leave any time for myself. It was 7 days a week. I'm not kidding. On special occasions like 4th of July, I would do double headers in different cities. I would do a day game in one city, and then the next city, if it was nearby, I would either drive or be driven in and do a night game there. And so, I was always on the go.
Well, I'm sure it was worth it, and I hope at least monetarily. You're right now sort of known in some circles, depending on the date, to be around 9, 10, 11 grand. In those days, what kind of scratch was the chicken pulling in?
Oh, I would say it was about a paltry sum, to say the least. But
okay, now were they weighing it by the pound or the ounce?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, it was enjoyable for me, and I was able to hire a staff to work with me as a result, and it was doing very good business, Rob, for the teams. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep inviting me, So it was excellent box office. You could just look up in the grandstands and see the seats were full, and so and then sponsors wanted to get involved because they wanted to attach their name to a family event like that, and have a big crowd, to be exposed to with their brand, and it just worked out. So I went, like I say, all across the world and up and down North America, and it was quite enjoyable. And like I say, you're talking to a guy who worked essentially for minimum wage for 5 years, so the money got to be good after I left the radio station, but there aren't too many people these days who would put in that kind of apprenticeship to try something for 5 years at a minimum wage. But it provided for me as a result a good proving ground, a good area to ply my trade, and then I'll tell you what it's like, Rob. It's like if you see some entertainer or singer on the stage, you think they're an overnight success. What you don't see is they probably traveled the nightclub route for many, many years in all kinds of towns across the country, never getting any attention or being seen, and then one day it just clicks for them, and they come out with a hit record or something, and then they're on their way. But nobody looks of the years that they spent, back in the background trying to make it.
No, for sure. And Parney talked about that same point on an earlier episode of The Minor Side, available over at minorside.com. Nobody just makes it overnight. You have to put in the work. Even the kid who won $3 million playing fucking Fortnite, he put in the work. But the schedule you're talking about, the travel, sounds exactly like even your act is a physical act. You're out there basically, I'd say, taking bumps on the field. To me, it's a very similar style and lifestyle to being a professional wrestler. And in terms of the travel, in terms of what you put your body through,
oh yeah,
being on the road all the time, double shots, and the show in and of itself, getting a crowd to go along for a ride with the stories or your bits that you're presenting, your material. But in terms of the physicality, have you ever had any sorts of injuries? I'm sure aches and pains and the travel didn't help. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh, I've had injuries, of course. One time I'm in St. Louis for the Blues of the NHL, and I'm at the old auditorium that they had.
There it is, the old auditorium.
And the steps going down the aisles were not to code, so they were grandfathered in, and they were a little unusual in terms of its sizing. And I remember as the organist during a face-off break is playing Zorba the Greek song, I'm dancing down the aisle to it. Well, I misjudged a step, and then I took a tumble all the way down to the glass, in fact, and fans thought it was part of the act, and they were laughing. But in that tumble down, it was all accidental. I ended up breaking my foot. and I did not know it at the time. It just felt very painful, but the show went on, and then and I continued doing a few more games until the pain got to be so much I had to have it checked out. And the doctor said, "No," he says, "Ted, you actually broke your foot. That's a serious stress fracture." So they put a cast on me, and I still continued with every show. Yeah, and to this day, I've never missed a single game due to injury or illness whatsoever. So every time I've been scheduled to go on, it's been me. But I've also had separated shoulders. One time doing a pratfall at a Atlanta Braves game, and I separated my shoulder there. And of course, you get various bumps and bruises along the way because, like we've touched on, it's a comedy slapstick, and yeah, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, and it's a little bit of a risk that you take.
And in terms of you being injured and not missing any dates, I kind of wanted to get to the idea that you never franchised the chicken character.
No, not at all.
I'd imagine one reason is because you want people to see the authentic show and don't want to have a lesser product out there. Could you tell me if you agree with that or not? But I'm sure people have tried to get a couple of suits made, train some people and be off to the races. You may even have left some opportunities out there because of that. And I believe, as they say here in podcasting, what say you, Ted?
Yeah, well, I felt that I didn't want to franchise it whatsoever because I value the trust of the audience, and I just felt it couldn't be done. I don't feel I could have trained somebody at the time to go out and become Chicken 2, Chicken 3, Chicken 4. No, that's not right. This was a single person, and it meant a lot to the audience to see that kind of credibility. It's a word you don't hear very much these days, but credibility, that this is the one guy that you've read about or seen or experienced as a kid and come back to see him. It's the same guy. And there's a lot to be said for that it lends to the credibility of the character. And it's not a department store Santa Claus that you see anywhere. It's a single individual. And so, quite honestly, Rob, there's the aspect that if I thought that I could train some people or coach them to do it, I may have given it a thought. But then you see guys like how many Michael Jordans are there? Okay, even his own son couldn't play up, and he was getting coaching on a daily basis, but his own son couldn't play like him.
Ooh, sick burn. In all seriousness, though, would you consider, or have you considered, like I've seen where you or your wife Jane has alluded to a time where you're not performing, where would you consider sort of bequeathing the suit or anointing someone as a new chicken?
If the situation ever presented itself, I'd have to give it a consideration. If some media company came and said, "Hey, Ted, we'd like to take over the character, and we think there's things we can do with it on another level," I'd give it a consideration. But Rob, nobody can play forever. That's a fact of life, and nobody can. And so you have to be open to possibilities as it goes along. There was a time I thought, I'll retire the outfit completely and move on. But then there are people telling me, fans especially, say, no, the chicken must continue. It's a legacy that you've started, and it's got to continue, much along the lines of like a Mickey Mouse. Walt Disney didn't retire the character after he retired originally from his line of work, and just like today, the Muppets still continue, even though Jim Henson has passed on, and so so who knows? I'm open to the possibilities, and might be opportunities there that's an oversight to me right now. But I'm open to any kind of thinking.
Well, it sounds like you're open for business, and that'd be great. We'd love for sure to see the character last forever. And I did want to ask about some of your favorite moments in the suit, but not at a baseball game. But first, you were involved in a historic football play that I wanted to talk about, the famous Holy Roller play. It eventually kept the Chargers out of the playoffs that year. Basically, on the final play of the game, Raiders have the ball in San Diego's red zone, although I'm sure nobody called it a red zone then. A couple of other ideas what a red zone might be, but either way, they were knocking on the door basically, and the Raiders quarterback Ken Stabler was getting sacked. He made, I guess, a forward pass that became a free ball. Their running back touched the ball, couldn't recover it. Then the Raiders tight end, Dave Casper, kind of kicked it into the end zone and recovered it there for what was ruled a touchdown. Pretty famous deal here.
First place was on the line, and the Raiders on this holy roller play were down by 4. Casper lands on it in the end zone for a touchdown, and the referees counted this, and everybody was stunned. And there I am in the end zone, up in the grandstand, just right below me. It's happening, and there at the old Jack Murphy Stadium, the end zone had a sidewalk there that was blocked off, and it was all mine. There's no seating there, and it was right behind the goalpost. So, and there it was happening right before me, and 55,000 people were in stunned silence. They weren't even booing at first. They didn't think this was going to count. They thought this was just a gigantic farce. But the referees let it stand. It was the last play of the game. The Raiders beat the Chargers on that terrible play that should have been called, and the Chargers dropped out of first place, by the way, and never recovered for the rest of the year. But I had to emulate basically what the fans were feeling, and so I pretended like I was having a seizure from what I had just seen, and rolled around on the railing, and then collapsed on my back. And I guess NFL Films caught all of that and showed it, and it's been almost an iconic scene ever since.
That is one thing. I guess the NFL never afraid to change the rules even then, I guess. But basically, you're a part of that moment in time.
Oh yeah. Thanks to NFL Films and NFL Films they were among the first to start shooting everything, and they were groundbreaking in what they were doing. And so I did not know, the camera would be on me, but it was funny that they caught that and had the presence of mind to include it.
For sure. And I guess in terms of not just baseball, but football and beyond, what are some of your favorite special events? And I say special events, meaning it's not a baseball game. Anything that's not a baseball game to me, I guess, is a special event. But what are some of the non-baseball activities that you've been a part of?
Well, I remember back in 2001 when President Bush invited me to the White House to be a part of the very first T-ball game on the White House lawn. That was a lot of fun. They had, it must have been 200 news people there from around the world televising it on the lawn, and I was out there just goofing with everybody, coaching at first base for both teams, and having a lot of fun with these tykes playing t-ball on the lawn. That was it was a unique event, and got to be a staple at the White House for several years thereafter, and so that was enjoyable. I enjoyed doing the Tonight Show back in the day. That was enjoyable and a lot of fun. Like I mentioned previously, being a Grand Marshal of Mardi Gras Parade. That was a feather in my cap, so to speak. But I've enjoyed everything, whether they're big situations to get involved or smaller situations. It's all good. You see, Rob, I enjoy what I do, and that's the secret, and to any job, I suppose. And so it all counts, and it all has its moments. So it's big events, it's small events, but I just derive a personal satisfaction from it all.
So how many presidents have you met then? Because I thought it was Bush 41 who had you at the White House. Obviously, baseball runs deep in the family, but how many presidents have you met then?
Oh, the first president I ever met was President Ford. This was in 1976. I was invited by the White House to join President Ford on stage with all the other celebrities for a big rally here in San Diego. So there I was up there with John Wayne and Zsa Zsa Gabor and Shirley Babashoff, the Olympic gold medalist swimmer at the time, and Rod McEwen, the poet, was there, and a few others. And so I'm up on the podium there, and and President Ford is introducing everybody in the lineup on stage with him, behind him there, and he introduces me and the audience. We had like 20,000 people in this huge parking lot of this shopping mall, just jammed in, and the crowd goes nuts. And so I decided to go over and give him a big bear hug there and raise his arms like victoriously, and everybody just went nuts over it. So I met President Ford. Then after that, it was President Reagan when he was in office, and then both Presidents Bush Senior and W, and then. And I'm trying to think that. I think that's all. And I've met several governors when they were in office. Of course, Jerry Brown here in California. So, it's nice to see that what I do has an appeal and a sense of humor to everyone. And that's the whole trick. I can't say, Rob, I bat 1,000. Okay, nobody does in this life, but I enjoy what I've done. Over the course of the years that I've been doing this.
Well, especially when you talk about giving a bear hug to President Ford, it's amazing what you can get away with when you're wearing not just a chicken costume, but really one that has the credibility behind it and the legacy that you've built it. And I certainly want to thank you for the time here on the Miners Side. And I know the Padres had a chicken bobblehead commemorating you in their 50th season a few weeks ago. So that must have been just another thrill. And other than that, we certainly hope you enjoyed your time here on the Miners Side, and we hope you enjoy and stay safe the rest of the summer into the early fall out there on the West Coast, Ted.
It's all good, and I enjoy it. And I got to tell you, I enjoy performing, and now I enjoy some aspects of personal life as well. So it's all good.
Well, Ted, we're happy for you. We know exactly what you mean with that. We thank you so much for spending the time with us here, and we hope to have you here in the Lehigh Valley real soon as well.
Okay, very good. Yes, yes, very good. I've been to that area too when they were independent balls. So I appreciate all the kind thoughts.
You too, Ted. Ted Giannoulis, the famous chicken here on the Miners Side of Life. As we said at the open, looking forward to new content here at minerside.com. In the next episode, it'll probably be one of the toughest episodes we've done to date, and more or less it's because I'm going to talk about myself and tell you how I got started in the industry and why I'm doing this podcast to begin with. Figured early on here on the Miners Side is a good time as any for me to really give you some context as to who I am and where I'm coming from as from an industry perspective. It'll be revealing in the sense that if you're looking to get into the industry, you'll learn what it took and what it's like if you've done it or already here. You'll be able to relate to most of it, I'm guessing, though, of course, all stories are different. I'll cover when I first went to the PBO job fair at the winter meetings in Vegas in 2009 and didn't get an interview, to my first job out of school, to finally getting an internship in Northwest Arkansas, up until when I first got to AA Binghamton. Also in the hopper here on the Miners Side is, of course, another candid conversation, this time with a former colleague of mine. I believe it'll be the first former colleague to have a published podcast, if you will, here. It's Connor Gates, who I knew and worked with from the Binghamton Mets. Connor's seemingly lifelong dream, and we'll talk about it, was to work in baseball. And he achieved that. He did it for nearly 4 years. When I say lifelong, like he got started when he was like 9 or 10 years old, and we'll talk about it all. Ultimately, he had a situation in Binghamton where he was let go. He left the industry for a bit, and now he's back on the Miners Side where he works for the New Jersey Devils AHL affiliate in Binghamton at the old Broome County Arena. Also upcoming is a chat with Anthony Serratelli. Anthony was signed by the Royals out of Indy Ball in 2007 and spent 6 years climbing the ranks of the Royals system to reach AAA. He spent nearly 3 years at the highest minor league level, including one in Vegas with the Mets. His final year in baseball was a 32-game stint with the Seibu Lions in Japan. He now runs a film and production company based out of New Jersey. We'll talk with him about it all. Other than that, if you liked what you heard here today or didn't, let us know. The show is at The Minor Side on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, YouTube as well. For me, I'm Rob Sternberg, at Rob Sternberg on Twitter. And thanks for listening. For the rest, here's the great Pete Candianis. He's a real nice guy.
This has been a presentation of The Minor Side of Life. We kindly ask for your support of this program by subscribing to the show on your preferred podcast player, joining the newsletter list at minorside.com, and following The Minor Side on social media. Plus, you can always visit theminorside.com for exclusive content and more. Thank you for listening.